Hello and welcome to The Big Debate. I'm Nkabinde. Over the past 13 years, at least 31 South African lesbians are known to have been murdered in homophobic attacks. Of these, only 2 cases have been brought to court and only 1 person was convicted. Gay men also face violence and discrimination despite the rights they enjoy in our Constitution. On this week's show, we bring you a special debate recorded for the BBC in 2010 at a time when a small number of Ugandan lawmakers were trying to introduce the death penalty for homosexuality in their country. Their argument was that homosexuality is contrary to African culture. Now, that's a view we put to the test in our debate for this week, entitled, "Is Homosexuality Un-African?"
Here in Johannesburg, the Constitutional Court is required to uphold South Africa's Bill of Rights, granting equality to all regardless of sexual orientation. However, right across Africa, gay people can face persecution, imprisonment, or even death. In this BBC World Debate, we ask, is homosexuality un-African? Hello, I'm Zainab Badawi. Welcome to Johannesburg for what promises to be a lively debate on an increasingly controversial topic. Along with our studio audience, we're joined on our panel by Ugandan MP David Bahati from the country's ruling party. He's the main force behind a proposed anti-homosexuality bill that in some cases would see homosexuals imprisoned for life. Festus Mogae, president of Botswana for 10 years until 2008, he now backs decriminalization of gay people, but is criticized for not doing more when he was in power. Paula Akugizibwe, an African thinker, public health activist and poet from Rwanda, who's lived and worked right across the continent. Sidika Tunde Lawal is a leader of the Ansarudeen Youth Association of Nigeria, a Muslim group with branches across the length and breadth of Nigeria. Eusebius McKaiser, a writer on gay issues, a talk show host and a philosophy lecturer based at the Center for Ethics at Wits University here in Johannesburg. That is our panel. Along with our invited audience of gay rights activists are religious groups opposed to homosexuality. Welcome to you all. Now, before we start our discussions on homosexuality in Africa, let us just set the scene for you. The BBC's Kevin Mwachiro has this overview. By the way, some viewers may find some of the images in this report disturbing.
Gay pride on the streets of Durban. South Africa has gone further than any other country in the world by enshrining gay rights in its constitution. But this legal protection doesn't always guarantee that people enjoy these rights in practice. This is Millicent Gaika. In May last year, she became the latest lesbian in South Africa's poor black townships to be subjected to a brutal sexual attack. Like many other lesbians, she underwent an ordeal known as corrective rape, carried out by gangs of youth who claim they intend converting their victims to heterosexuality. These attacks take place despite South Africa's laws aimed at protecting gay people. In 13 other African countries, homosexuality is also permitted by law. But in the remaining 38 African nations, being gay is a crime. In 3, it is punishable by the death penalty. Nowhere is the debate more polarized than here in Uganda.
It is a sin. You can't have sex with another man. This is really contrary to God.
I'm also against homosexuality because it's totally against our culture.
Life imprisonment. It's a fair what? It's a fair punishment.
Where do these attitudes come from? One place is the church. Pastor Martin Semper preaches to students at McKaiser University in Kampala.
The standard is a man is to marry what? A woman, and the two shall become one. Therefore, if you have others, such as a man with another man, you are falling short of the standard. A man with an animal, a donkey, a goat. You have fallen short of this. Jesus laid the standard.
Last year, a Ugandan newspaper published the names and photographs of 100 alleged homosexuals and called for them to be hanged. The newspaper's editor, Giles Muhame, claims that homosexuals in Uganda recruit young people, encouraging them to be gay. It's this practice which he says justifies the death penalty.
In my view, I also support this man. They should be hanged.
You'd like to see
Yes,
homosexuals?
and the hanging should be public.
The newspaper's publication of the identity of alleged homosexuals coincided with a new anti-gay bill introduced into Uganda's parliament by lawmaker David Bahati. It calls for life imprisonment for homosexuals and the death penalty for aggravated or repeated cases. If his bill were to become law, all Ugandans would be required to report homosexuals to the authorities. Similar anti-gay initiatives continue to be discussed in other African countries. Sylvia Tamale has conducted research into the history of same-sex relationships in Africa. She rejects the view that homosexuality is un-African.
Gay people have always lived among communities. Everyone, in the village would know that so-and-so, sleeps with another man, but they were not vilified. They were not praised, but they were not vilified. That's my point. So all these anti-gay sentiments came from outside.
Najib is a gay Ugandan man who lives in the slum of Bwaise in Kampala. He runs a support group for young gay men and women in his area. He believes that Uganda's lawmakers have their priorities wrong.
We are gays because we are made to be gays. It's what we feel. The way I can't stop Bahati from being a straight guy to turn to be a gay is the way he can't stop me or he can't stop us from being gays. This is our life, and this is my life in particular. I really love it, and I'm really proud of it. I really feel comfortable with guys. I've never felt women. So how will you force me to feel something?
So we've set the scene there. David Bahati, like it or not, homosexuality is there in Africa. You cannot say it is un-African, can you?
It's un-African because it is inconsistent with African values of procreation, of a belief in the continuity of family and clan. So
the existence of homosexuals in Africa, you think, is compromising population growth in Africa? Is that what you're saying?
Certainly.
It is?
Yeah.
Can you give us a figure on that, Mr. Bahati?
No, I do not have to give you the figure because homosexuality is illegal in our country, and therefore there is no way we can capture this figure into our statistics.
Is it about 30 million people live in Uganda?
We have 33 million people living in Uganda.
33 million in Uganda, and you think that's not enough? You think your population's being compromised by the existence of homosexuals?
No, the key issue is it is inconsistent with our belief of continuity of family and clan.
All right.
That's key.
Festus Mahai, is homosexuality un-African?
No, because there are homosexuals in Africa as elsewhere. It does appear that homosexuality have always existed.
Paula, you have lived in several countries right across Africa. In your view, do you think that there is this kind of common position that homosexuality is either African or un-African?
I think it varies. But like Remo Hai said, it has always been with us, and ideological prejudice has also always been with us. So the question of whether it's African or not is really just a question of whether we want to cling to the ideological prejudice or whether we want to let people have the right to experience their own humanity. You can't change human nature, but culture is about how you respond to it. So I would say homophobia is the un-African thing because homophobia creates a culture of hatred, it creates a culture of intolerance, and that has no space in our continent.
Siddique, so homosexuality is African, it's homophobia that is un-African. From an African and Muslim perspective, what's your view?
Well, I think homosexuality is un-African, first of all, because even though it's something that is human nature, it's not something that we have promoted. It's not something that
in Africa naturally is seen as something deviant. People have their natural instincts, yes, but over centuries, even though we have had homosexuals over the years, over the centuries, they've not come out. It's not something we're used to in the African continent. And so when people
So what are you saying? You're all right with homosexuals existing as long as they're quiet about it?
Yes, because I think it offends the sensibility of others around them.
Why does it affect the sensibilities of others?
Because it's something that's over just recently now that they're starting to make it so public. Let me put it like that.
And then homophobia, Paula says that's the thing that is actually un-African. I mean, would you agree with that?
Well, I think nobody should attack anybody based on their natural instincts or whatever they feel like doing. As long as they're adults, they're consenting to it, people should leave others too.
And then, so, what about from a Muslim perspective? Because Nigeria has got around a dozen states that base their law on Sharia law, where if a man indulges in homosexuality, it is actually punishable by death. A lesbian would get 6 months in prison and 50 lashes. Well, but is that something you like? You like the idea of that?
Talking as a Muslim, homosexuality falls in the category of things that are forbidden, strictly. No, you know, it is not allowed. It is haram.
Yubi, I mean, I have to say to you that when Sadiqa says something like, actually, the majority of people's sensibilities are affronted when it comes to that very assertive gay agenda that we do see in Western countries, and it is that which is un-African. Fair point.
Not at all, Zainab. I mean, when I listen to David and also Sadiqa, what I hear is basically a tissue of irrational argument and hatred. And where does one even start? Let's start with David's point of view. This idea that African values is all about procreation and we're all a bunch of sex machines is nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Okay? What does David have to say to a straight couple who's sterile, that they should feel less African because they can't give birth to kids? What about a gay couple that have decided, actually, I want to have a kid, but I want to continue living in a same-sex relationship the day after I've spawned one? Will you be more comfortable with that person? It's just a badly thought-through point of view. And the same with Sadiqa's. I mean, this idea of the 2 points that she's mentioned, firstly, that I get offended. Well, I get offended by homophobes. Does that mean that he must go into the closet, as it were? No. We all have a right to exist. The fact that you are aesthetically insulted by looking at two people who are in the same-sex relationships, who are holding hands in public, that's neither here nor there. Why should I be condoning your homophobia?
Sadiqa, are you offended by
this
gentleman here?
No,
But he's just told you he is a gay man working in gay activism, and he wants to be open about it.
Well,
are you offended by him?
No, I'm not. The display of their how do I put it in now? Well,
position.
The public display of, that's what I mean by...
Public display, yes. Two men kissing in public, for instance. You don't like
kind
that?
Of thing. Well, we would ordinarily accept it from a straight couple.
Do you accept that, perhaps? I mean,
well,
do you want the right to kiss somebody, a male partner or boyfriend in public?
Well, of course I do. I mean, it's a good start. That, you know, I'm not about to be lashed for what I'm doing if it was up to her. But the real question... The real question, Sadiqa, is this. Do you accept that the fact that you are offended in terms of your sensibilities, do you accept that there's no basis for public policy and for laws, that it's your own private viewpoint, and I respect your entitlement to have it, but you wouldn't co-sign your name to a bill by David? Do you accept that?
I won't co-sign my name to a bill like that.
All right, we'll develop that point later. David, you said very clearly homosexuality is un-African because Africans want to go forth and multiply and have children, and you actually said that the existence of homosexuals in Africa compromises population growth. Is that what you said?
In the long run, and that's one reason.
The long run.
The other reason is we don't have to confuse 2 points. One, existence of something does not necessarily mean acceptance. It's an acceptance of homosexuality that makes it African, or the unacceptance of homosexuality that makes it an African. It's not the existence. There are so many things that have existed on the continent.
David,
the other thing,
2 points. That's
if I can make a point.
Firstly, you don't have a monopoly on what it means to be African. Not every single person on the continent shares that paper.
Okay? I'll give you a chance to come back. Just a minute.
And secondly, but much more importantly, let's say for the sake of argument that the majority of Africans share your viewpoint. So what? The fact that the majority of people may be sexist and misogynist doesn't mean we need laws that reflect that. It means those attitudes are wrong and need to be engaged. The question of what is morally right or wrong is not a question of doing a head count and seeing what the majority of people think.
But this point about in the long run, populations are going to be compromised because of the existence of homosexuals.
Well, it's nonsense. I mean, from a statistical point of view, gay people are always going to be a statistical minority, so it's not a real problem. But at any rate, I mean, in the long run, we're all dead. The question is whether it's morally okay,
all right.
whether it's morally okay for public policy to reflect that viewpoint.
No,
David Bahati, let him reply.
You'd be certainly entitled to his opinion, and that's why we celebrate this democracy. But the point I make, the point I make,
okay, let him
the
make
point
his point.
I make also is that Africa, especially from the country I come from, we are Christians, and we view homosexuality as sin, period.
Well, we're going to be talking to some Christians in the audience. Let me just get a view there. Your point.
I am an African. We believe in being remembered for eternity. So the only way to do that is through reproduction. How do I reproduce with another man and claim that I'm an African? It can't be done. I am a Christian. In a biblical point of view, homosexuality is wickedness. The only way for my surname to continue, you see, for my surname to continue is through reproduction. I am an African.
Okay, thank you. Right. Let's just stick to this question of, is homosexuality un-African? I want to go to an African traditional healer here in our audience. Nkunzi Nkabinde is from here in South Africa, and let's just see some pictures of the kind of things that she does. And using herbal remedies, Nkunzi uses ages-old medicine to treat patients all sorts of ailments that they're suffering from. She's also a lesbian, married to Joanna, and they have an adopted daughter who you can see there. Nkunzi.
Yes, my dear.
Do you see any contradiction between being an African traditional healer and also a married lesbian?
I don't see any contradiction. For me, I am the child of the values. My ancestors, they accept me the way I am, and they allow me to have a wife.
This is your wife, Joanna,
yes,
next to you there. Wife. You've celebrated, is it 3 years you've been married now?
Definitely. And
Joanna. And do you have people who say, oh, I'm not going to go to Nkunzi because, you know what, she's a lesbian and she's got a wife? Do you have people who are slightly turned off by that and don't come to you?
Let me tell you about that. I do have clients who are older men, and when they come to me, they're like, definitely, you are helping us. And they accept my sexuality. I even got trainees, students that I'm training who are straight. And they came to me to be trained to become traditional healers.
You two just stand up for me. You stand up for me. Nkunzi and your wife, Joanna. David. Siddiqa. Stay standing. No, actually, come here. Come here. Does anybody have a problem? Does anybody have a problem with these two ladies? Siddiqa, you have a problem. You have a problem. David Bahati, you have a problem with two ladies like this. You would have a problem.
Well, I'm actually uncomfortable proceeding forward.
Yeah, uncomfortable.
Okay, but they have adopted a child presumably who was in a home.
She was suffering. Basically, when we found the child, she was definitely not in a good state.
So there you are. You've got a gay couple here who are actually helping a child that was abandoned for whatever reason. So they are helping the family values which you say you adhere to.
We do recognize that there are countries which have which recognize homosexuality as a human right. And in South Africa, certainly we do that. But this is something that we shall not allow in our country.
All right,
and we should be respected.
Sit down, ladies. Thank you
Yeah.
very much, ladies. Okay. I have to say, though, Nkunzi and Joanna, a fellow South African here, Chief Luvaivai, he is chief of the Venda people. What's your view? You describe yourself also as a traditional South African. What about homosexuality? In your view, is it African or is it un-African?
In actual fact, you must remember that a culture is dynamic. It changes and it moves with time. But however, there are some things that we cannot change them when it comes to the culture, more especially the value and the morals. We must look at the end results of this action that was happening here. What is going to inform our young children? Are we going to have a sustainability population?
Let them clap you.
We as traditional leaders look after the customs and the value of our African people. We cannot allow that.
You cannot allow same-sex. You don't like same-sex relationships. What do you call your traditional family values here then? Polygamy, for instance, is something which is very common in African tribal society. You're saying that that's okay? A man can have 3, 4, 5 wives? Is that okay?
Polygamy, it is okay.
Is okay?
Yes.
How many wives do you have? How many wives do you have?
I've got 1 wife married officially now, and I'm still having 2 to marry.
So you are a defender of polygamy because you think it's traditional African culture and you think it's right. And how many children do you have? How many children do you have?
I've got 4 children.
4 children, okay.
So imagine if I was promoting what
4 official children?
Yeah, official.
How many unofficial?
I don't have an official. I don't have an official. What I would like to elaborate is that, what about if, during my time, if I came across with this situation, it means that I will be not having the kids. And then what is going to be a continuity of my chieftainship? Because there will be nobody called to take over.
So you're agreeing with David Bahati here?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I want to go to... Yeah, David, briefly, and you then want to go to the audience some more.
If I can make one point. You've talked about adopting children, but we have a number of children in Uganda who have been traumatized by the fact that they've been adopted by gay couples, and they are traumatized. Listen, they are traumatized by being forced to call a man mom or a woman dad. It's we are looking at them and they are traumatized.
Yubi, you wanted to come here and I want to go to the audience. Yubi?
Yeah, I wanted to make a small point. I think it might surprise many homophobes to know that gay people can actually procreate.
Yes.
So this argument...
Yeah, but he just said he doesn't like the idea of 2 same-sex people having a child.
Yeah, but then they need to pick their argument. Do they actually just don't like gay people full stop for no reason?
We'll develop that.
Or is it because of the false belief that gay people can't actually have kids or be good parents?
You are from South Africa. You are a practicing Muslim. What was your feeling when you heard Sadiqa speak about her Muslim African attitudes towards homosexuality?
I think, Sadiqa, your attitude reflects attitudes of many women that come from Middle Eastern countries and North African countries that are of the Islamic faith. And I want to tell you that being homosexual, and this is probably another debate all on its own, but being homosexual is not un-Islamic. If anything, the Quran promotes diversity. And I think that a lot of what you believe and a lot of what you bring into the table is based on what you have been told by a patriarchal system. A patriarchal system that informs what African is, what un-African is, what Islamic is, and what un-Islamic is.
A Lutheran pastor here wants to say something. I'll hold the mic.
Yes. Hi, my name is Peter Oberholz. I'm Director of Inclusive and Affirming Ministries. What we do is we try and dialogue with all people, but especially Christians who believe in fundamentalism is the way. Now, I hear you say, David, it's un-African. Do you mean Africa before Christianity or after Christianity? Because you say we're also Christian. What is un-African is religious intolerance and fundamentalism. I'm hearing you speak from one side only, religious Christian fundamentalism, and I'm sorry to say the words you're using are identical to the 3 American pastors who went to your country to talk to you and your president and many leaders with their agenda saying that we're trying to recruit the whole world.
All right.
So you want to be African, are voicing the voice of right-wing American fundamentalists.
All right, okay. Just briefly address this point. You've heard it before that you have links with conservative Christian organizations, principally in America, the Family, it's called, for instance.
In relation to the piece of legislation that I'm proposing, It's a Ugandan legislation proposed by Ugandans. It has nothing to do with people from other countries.
All right, okay. I want to go to Victor Mukasa. Victor Mukasa, you are from Uganda, like David Bahati. You describe yourself as a transgender person.
I'm a human rights defender.
You're a human rights defender and a transgender.
Yes.
That rhymes. Okay. So, what do you make of what you've heard so far?
Yeah, I think it's just so disappointing to hear you, Bahati, telling lies to people here.
I'm sure he would not say that he's telling lies.
Yeah, he's telling lies.
Okay, he's got a different point of view from yours. Yes?
Okay.
So, you're saying...
Him telling people that homosexuality is un-African, and he links it to Christianity and all these things, yet you know very well, Bahati, even in all the history, I'm sure the history you've studied is what I've studied, in pre-colonial Africa, we were never told about homophobia in Africa. You know very well that it all started with the Christians coming and demonizing it. Perima, you know how we call them in our language, those missionaries. You also know that the penal code on which you're basing everything that you're doing against homosexuals was brought by the British when they colonized our nation.
All right, okay. Okay, developing this point that Victor Mukasa made about the fact that actually go through history and you see that homosexuality has existed. Raymond Perrier, you are at a Jesuit institute here in Johannesburg, and you've done some actual research into the existence of homosexuality in Africa.
Yes, I had the great privilege of living and working in the beautiful country of Uganda a few years ago. And as you know, David, one of the foundational stories of the Christian church in Uganda is the story of the Ugandan martyrs, a group of young men who were martyred because of their Christianity. But the reason, what triggered their martyrdom was that King Mwanga, the king of the Buganda, tried to have gay sex with them. So clearly it was the king, who was presumably African, indeed a representative of everything that was most important about the Buganda. It was he who was homosexual. It was the Christians who refused his advances.
That's just one king, though.
But is one king...
King Mwanga II you're talking about.
Is one king not enough?
Well, I mean, it's not enough perhaps to base the whole, you know, history, others, perhaps other examples from Africa.
But it certainly challenges the idea that it was Europeans who brought in homosexuality. What it seems to suggest is that it was Europeans who brought in homophobia.
So you're saying that this is something that is verifiable
Zainab,
through
I just
history.
wanted to inform him that actually we have history before that happened, the king, and we know that this was brought by the Arab traders.
Okay,
it goes beyond that, yeah. It goes beyond what you know.
The Arabs would not say that they condone homosexuality either.
When I said Arab traders, I meant Western traders.
I'm Prince Cyprian Mngangeni from Congress of Traditional Leaders in Southern Hemisphere. We as the traditional, we do not support, is not African homosexual, because God made men and women. Never made men and women. So we do not support it. South Africa is the last country to be liberated, but it's the first country to promulgate this act.
And it doesn't represent your view, then, the fact that it's enshrined in the Constitution?
We, as the traditional leaders, we didn't support this thing. Even the survey was being conducted in this country. 98% never supported the same-sex marriages. But our government made a big mistake. Yeah, our government made a big mistake to promulgate to ban act. So we, as the traditional leaders, were still saying government must call a referendum to nullify this thing, because it's inhumane. It's against the law, it's against the code, where the Christians are not. We do not support same-sex marriage.
Okay. All right. Okay, well, let's now just look at why, not whether it's African or un-African, but why do you think homosexual rights should be supported? Paula.
I don't see it as homosexual rights, gay rights. I see it as equal rights. At the end of the day, people have people have different inclinations, and people should be allowed to express themselves in whatever way comes naturally to them. I think homophobia is a choice. I don't think it's a natural phenomenon. If children in Uganda are traumatized because they've been adopted by gay parents, it's because an environment has been created based on various systems, Christianity, African culture, whatever you want to call it, that makes them feel traumatized. We could also choose to create a culture that makes them feel accepted, that makes, that is based on tolerance. And I think that's really the sort of African culture we aspire to.
Let's see what Festus Mochai says here, because as a former president, you know that your fellow presidents now and prime ministers are perhaps, some would argue, creating that environment that Paula says, whereby people who are inclined to homophobia feel that they are able to make their homophobic comments, because no president in power, including you yourself, Mr. Mogai, when you are actually in power, you do not come out blatantly in support of gay rights. Fair
yes,
point?
I did not come out in support of gay rights, but I did come up in support of human rights. Therefore, I did not specifically, I'm not a gay activist. I'm not a pro-gay activist. No. I say, well, I don't understand the preference, the sexual preference, but they are entitled to it. And that therefore they should not be discriminated against, it should not be criminalized.
But why, when you were president, did you not repeal? Why did you not make it legal when you were president?
I ruled in a democracy. I could only do what was feasible.
Did you try?
The majority of our people are still opposed. So I must convince them first before changing the law unilaterally. And when I was president, even without changing the law,
all right, let's see.
I gave instructions to our police. They stopped arresting or harassing lesbians.
Monica is a gay rights activist from Botswana, Mr. President.
Yes.
Mr. Mogai, with due respect, I believe that you have the power when, for 10 years, you could have changed the law. You could have at least brought up the matter within Parliament or within the policymakers to at least try and change. That would never happen. So that, I think that that's the fundamental problem that we have is the effort that you're putting in now, we never actually felt it in the country, at home, when you had the power to change things.
When we see, I mean, Mr. Mogai, I want to ask you, when you see the Kenyan Prime Minister Raila Odinga saying homosexuals should be arrested and put in prison, Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe has compared them to dogs and pigs. Then he said, oh, I'm sorry I said that. It's an insult to dogs and pigs. That's the kind of rhetoric you can get from African leaders. So why this reticence? Why do they create this climate?
I did not, and she, my compatriot, she was not persecuted or arrested during my term of office. So that's what I did. But I could not change the law because that had been necessarily stirring up a hornet's nest.
But why are African leaders, Mr.
I was
Mogai,
not willing to lose an election on behalf of the gays. But
leave it. Is that true?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, wait.
Because
he's being honest. He's being honest. Listen. And do you think, Mr. Mogai, that...
And I discussed with my cabinet.
Okay, can I ask you, Mr.
what
Mogai,
I think.
are other African presidents, you've spoken to many over 10 years, did they have, even those who wanted to support gay rights, felt, I don't want to lose an election, it's not worth it? Did a lot of them make that point to you?
I don't know, no, they haven't. We haven't talked about it.
Did you not discuss...
Except only now, those who make proposals similar to my brothers here, those are the ones that I engage, or are my brother. Now you are going too far.
Okay, Ubi, are you disappointed that political leaders...
Okay, all right.
Are you disappointed that political leaders are not more forthcoming, or do you accept that they don't want to lose elections?
No, I don't accept it. I'm deeply disappointed, and I was hoping, as cute as the admission is, and good for TV, I'm hoping that Mr. Mogai will at least accept that his attitude retrospectively is deeply immoral, because by saying that you're not willing to lose an election for the gay minority, you make it sound like it's a political strategy, but it's much more simple. You weren't willing to lose an election, even if it meant affirming the dignity and equality of all people in your country.
You are right. Now you are talking nonsense.
Just a minute.
Now you are talking nonsense, because my people, during my rule, Their dignity was not affronted. They were never arrested. They were never insulted. They were never harassed.
Mr. Mohammed,
Therefore,
all due
they were
respect,
not.
no, that's not good enough.
Your judgment.
When the law says to me, Eusebius McKaiser, as a gay man, what you do is illegal and it's immoral, that is undermining my dignity. The fact that behind the scenes you call up a policeman and say, dude, don't arrest Eusebius on the streets, it's not good enough, because the message that the law signals in itself affirms homophobia, and for that you should take moral accountability.
I agree that the law that says that is wrong, but I've told you that I wasn't willing to, yes, oh yes, no apologies, no apologies.
Just tell us why you feel that your anti-homosexuality bill, strengthening the current laws in Uganda whereby homosexuality is already punishable by up to 14 years in prison, why you feel that needs strengthening?
Our constitution prohibits same-sex marriage. And this law is coming in to have a corresponding law that will punish same-sex marriage. That's number one. The second one, we have a problem of recruitment.
So you're saying that your bill is opposed to the recruitment of minors by adult homosexuals?
Yes, and it has four core elements.
So it's about paedophilia, it's not about homosexuality then?
It has four elements.
I'll just ask you, is it about paedophilia? You have spoken before about the existence of videos that show the recruitment, in your view, your claims, that there are these adult homosexuals who are targeting minors. Just put the flesh on the bones. What exactly do you mean?
We have evidence, and we are, listen, we are not obliged to present this evidence to this audience. Listen, I am a member, listen, I am a member.
David Bahati to take the stage like this.
No, I'm going to give you a chance. Okay, wait, let's see. I'm going to come to somebody from Uganda. Okay, wait. Okay, wait.
Whether you make whatever amount of noise, I cannot allow our children, Ugandan children, to be recruited into homosexuality. I will never allow it.
Wait.
Whether you allow it or not.
Wait. Paula, is there anything in your work in health and sexual reproductive rights? You've lived in several countries in Africa. Are you aware of this kind of active recruitment campaign which David Bahati claims is in existence?
I'm not personally aware of it, no. I think sexual coercion of any kind is a problem, but there's no reason why we need to frame it within the homosexuality, mindset. It's got nothing to do with being gay.
Fikile is from the Association of African Lesbians.
It is a coalition of African lesbians, which is an organization that works on the whole continent. We are working to defend and promote the rights of lesbian women, bisexual women, transgender people on the whole continent. And we are Africans. I stand here as an African person. I cannot allow a conversation to go on insulting me and telling me that I'm not an African. You're actually not even insulting me. You're insulting my ancestors.
That's not what I'm saying.
You understand me?
No one has suggested that you are an African. But if you believe in homosexuality, then you are believing in something that is an African. So that's what we are saying.
Let me start by indicating how disappointed I am for David Bahati to be treated in the manner in which he was treated. He is a member of parliament in his country. The respect that he receives in his country must be meted out to him in this country.
Okay, all right. Caleb, you are a member of a Christian political party of young people here in South Africa. You've got 3 members of parliament.
Number one, everybody seated here is confusing the fact here. The issue is not about the hatred or the acceptance thereof. The matter is it African or not? Now, the truth, listen. Yeah. The truth of the matter is, let us conduct this debate in an orderly manner, in a family setup. in a family setup. And as much as you want to unravel the true fabric of being African, by saying that being gay is acceptable or being lesbian is, it is totally against the morals of an African family.
My name is Amina Frenzy. I'm African and Muslim and a woman and probably straight. But I'm appalled at some of the views that we have heard here. Are we not signatories to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? And if that is the case, you know, why are we not brought to book for not adhering to some of the very universal principles that we're adhering to? That's very basic.
I'm Nemo Malachi from the ACDP Youth Foundation. I'm the National Secgen. There are obviously biblical reasons against homosexuality, but there are also non-biblical reasons, such as thousands of years of traditional male-female marriages across the cultures and religions, the effect of public health catastrophe among homosexual men, the fact of numerous studies showing the importance of to children of a father and mother. In as much as polygamy is not allowed in America and stuff, and we do not impose it upon them because of human rights, they cannot impose their culture upon us due to human rights.
I am Mazibuko Jaka, a straight African male with deep rural roots. It's clear to me that the answer to the Bahatis of this world is Africans like me rising up against them to say to them, what they stand for is not for us. We must make it clear as Africans across the world, across the continent, that we want equality, we want freedom, we want no discrimination, we want no ignorance of the type we have seen.
Okay, panel, I want you just to make your final points on this question of, is homosexuality un-African, and if so, what do you think should be done about it? David Bahati, start with you.
One member from the audience said that we are all subscribing to a Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Not at the UN, not at the African Union, have all countries said that we are subscribing to a sexual orientation, a right of sexual orientation of any kind. That's the reason why in some countries homosexuality is a human right, in other countries not a human right. And we respect each other. It's a mutual respect. You can do it the way you do it in South Africa, we respect that. But leave us in Uganda, we cannot allow homosexuality to be practiced. The final point, if I may, I leave South Africa with my heart bleeding.
Festus Mohai.
I can't understand why we say homosexuality is un-African when there is evidence that it has always existed in Africa and it exists today as it does elsewhere in the world. And therefore it appears to me that homosexuality, whether we understand it or not, or like it or not, is as African as it is European, as it is Asian. That's one. So our way of doing things in Botswana is to try to persuade. And my participation in this forum today, I was hoping that we would discuss without too much excitement, because we would try to persuade the rest of Africa and show them that their homophobia is unjustified. But unfortunately, we became too excited, emotionally affected. They stood up and shouted those who disagreed with them. Then it appears that we are using intolerance to fight intolerance. So I thought maybe that's a little presentational.
Paula, your view on what you've heard and how things can move forward?
Well, I think when you said that you're going to leave with a bleeding heart, that really captured my sentiments. And I think for everyone in this room, regardless of which side of the camp you stand on, people are going to leave here today with bleeding hearts, or at least with a balance of negative emotions, because that's what hatred does to us. Rwanda was one of only 2 countries that spoke out at the United Nations in December last year. I'm from Rwanda, which is a conservative country, yes, but spoke out to say that we shouldn't discriminate against people based on sexual orientation. Because in Rwanda, we have too recently felt just how bitter the sting of that intolerance can be, because hatred is a double-edged sword. So I mean, call me a conspiracy theorist, but I can't help but wonder if this obsession that's arisen lately with whipping people up into frenzies over ideological lines of sexual orientation in this continent is really a way of distracting us from the bigger issues that we're fighting, like, you know, food insecurity, the state of our health systems, the plundering of our natural resources. Diversity will always be with us, but intolerance and hatred, that is a choice. So if we can agree that love is the fundamental basis of Christianity, if we can agree that Ubuntu or Muntu is the fundamental basis of being an African, it's togetherness, it's solidarity, if we can agree that God, however you define him or her, respects free will of all human beings, then why can't we just choose love and tolerance so we can move forward and talk about the things that really matter?
Sidiki Tundelewa?
Gay people should, I think, in the African continent, don't rub it in our faces. We are still finding it difficult to accept that a man or a woman and a woman should kiss in public or do the other things a man and a woman should do. So please, I think you should just leave it, well, I don't know if I work elsewhere in Europe or whatever, but in Africa, I think.
Okay. Yubi. Yubi.
I want to make 2 points in closing, Zainab. The first is that I must say I'm deeply disappointed with the South Africans in the audience who are supportive of the sentiments, if not the bill, that David is proposing. And the reason for that is that, and it links up with Paula's example of the Rwandese experience, we haven't yet forgotten the scars of apartheid and what it meant as black people in this country to have your humanity reduced to something else. And yet, what short memories we have, because our own experiences of being discriminated against on the grounds of race, which is analogous to sexual discrimination, doesn't somehow make people reflect on why all forms of prejudice are bad. The second point I want to put on the table in closing is to say really to David this, that I think we're in danger of being over-intellectual. We talk about, is it African, is it not African? Is there anthropological experience predating Christians' arrival or not? I don't care about those things. We're forgetting the humanity of this, David. For me, if you look at Frank and his partner, if you want to talk about my own experiences with my partners, it's the same love that you are experiencing. It's the same trials and tribulations in my personal life. I'm not harming you. All I'm asking for is to give me the private space to live a loving relationship with another person of my own choosing.
All right, well, clearly the gulf still exists between the 2 camps in this debate. Is homosexuality un-African? I hope we've shed both heat and light on this topic of being gay in Africa, thanks to our panel, our studio audience, and to you, wherever you are, for watching. From me, Zainab Badawi in Johannesburg. Goodbye.